All right, greetings. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. How y'all feeling? Good to see you. Thanks for hanging out with me today on the Black Bear News. A really good way to support the channel is buymeacoffee.com/blackbearnews. You can also support me at Patreon/blackbearnews. Cash apps. The Cash App and the Venmo links are in my description box. YouTube tips, greatly appreciated. And Rockfin tips, also greatly appreciated. Fuzzy meaning Poppy. Out of focus? No, I think that's you. I look pretty in focus from my vantage point. You're feeling pretty doomy, Andre, today. Yeah. I have those moods and feelings myself. I don't know. Or maybe I've just lost the capacity to stay like, focused on the doom. I'm just like, I don't know, man. I'm just living my life and trying to do the best I can with the situation at hand, and the rolling with it, if you will. Eventually, the big picture will kind of take over. Right? Bigger things will be happening. So I'm actually very thankful for the small things. I'm thankful for the very, modern, first world problems that I encounter. I'm actually, I'm actually appreciative of it, because things are going to be so much worse, and it could be so much worse. But I feel you, Andre. I feel you on that. Definitely. There are moments. Oh, I've been wanting to listen to that, the Russell Brand on Joe Rogan. I've been listening to enough Joe Rogan these days. I really like Joe Rogan, and I don't know, I can't, for whatever reason, I don't seem to listen to a lot of Joe Rogan these days, but I will try and check that one out. But Russell Brand doing some really great work. For sure. And give it up for the voices of reason, and for people who are doing real journalism out there, and people trying to alert the masses to the propaganda that we receive 24/7, trying to, poke holes in what are basically balloons filled with hot air, right? They're not, they're not real. They're mirages. They're clouds. It's fiction. When you poke a hole in a fiction with truth, with a needle of truth, it's very powerful. And the more people that can be doing that at this time, the better we are for it. So, take those moments of truth, and be thankful of them where you can. Where are my, man? There's a whole lot to cover today. I feel like I've been playing a little fast and loose with the with being on YouTube, talking about certain things on YouTube. Luckily, nothing too bad yet, but we may jump off of YouTube today in order to talk about some other stories. One of which is very interesting. Story out of the UK. A story about Matt Hancock and something he said in a private text. But the propaganda machine is at full tilt right now. And that is hard to get around, so that's why we need these truth tellers. Speaking of Russell Brand, well, you know. From Perpetual Shadowban retweeting Glenn Greenwald. There's a New Statesman article that's titled "How We Have Lost Russell Brand." We meaning the left, and they're calling Russell Brand far right, and that's not anything new. The headline is hilarious. The once sexy communist has become an American culture wars pundit. But that's, you know, that's what happens these days. If you say anything that is against the, dominant, liberal, democratic, whatever you want to call it, lefty paradigm, anything that goes against that, you're immediately a right winger, far right. That's a famous one, far right. Anyways, it's hilarious. And Spit and Benham says it's amazing to me that questioning authority and being anti-establishment automatically gets you labeled a far-right extremist now, or, And if you're on the left, if there's no way for them to paint you as a far-right extremist, right? If you were just so lefty that you can't paint that position as right, well, then you're a far-left extreme, right? Then you're an extremist. You're a domestic something, bop, bop, bop. The left is lost. And anybody who, people who are doing this kind of stuff, who consider themselves left or Democrats or, blah, blah, blah. Well, the reason, and the funny thing is, Obsolete Optics, didn't I just say this? He actually, I've said this millions of times, the sneaky Jedi mind trick shit. CIA has really outdone themselves with this one. That's actually why I wanted to read that, is because it actually is something that I've said multiple times. But they've got you. They've got you good, right? If you think that anybody that doesn't like, whatever it might be, people that believe in a lab leak, or people that, don't like Biden or don't like his policies, or think the war is bad, these are all far right extremists, and they might even be Trumpers. If you are one of those people that believe that, you are lost. They have got you. They've got you. You're captured. You have no brain. You have no mind of your own. You are the scarecrow. If I only had a brain. Anyways, let's hold on. We'll kind of I'll try and I'll try and be a little bit organized today. What's up? We're live on Callin, Rockfin, YouTube. From Doomer Girl News, global warming and the overfishing fish that are high up on the food chain could lead to a sharp decline in carbonate excretion, which helps prevent ocean acidification. That would you call that a feedback? Call that a feedback loop or a I don't know. Right? Bony fish are more recognized as food sources than as carbon regulators. They provide an array of services relevant to climate change mitigation. For instance, they store carbon within their bodies as they grow and export it to deep seas through their sinking feces and carcasses. But they also make carbonates from marine salts within their guts and excrete them at high rates. This makes them especially important within the inorganic carbon cycle of the oceans. Did y'all know this? So if we overfish or impact the population size of these fish, these larger bony fish, then we actually hurry along, or we deplete the ability of the ocean being a carbon sink. We hurry along ocean acidification, right? So maybe we shouldn't overfish the oceans and pull all the fish out. Next thing they're going to tell you, you can't eat fish anymore. They're going to tell you can't fish. Let's look at this. This is interesting. This is really long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just wanted to read a little bit of this. About overshoot. Overshoot, why it's already too late to save civilization. It's a 24-minute read, which we don't have 24 minutes. I'm going to do about 5 minutes of this. But just to give, this is an overview of overshoot. I have some bad news. Civilization is going to collapse not in 1,000 years, not in 100 years, but within the lifetimes of most people alive today. It doesn't necessarily mean humans will go extinct, but at the very least, billions of people are going to die from disease, violence, starvation, dehydration, natural disasters, and war. How do I know this? Because it has already begun. Our global industrial civilization has been headed for collapse for at least 50 years. That's how long ago the human population went into overshoot, a concept that is crucial to understand if you're going to make sense of the horrors that await us in the 21st century. I know it gets pretty dark on this channel. Somebody called me a lunatic the other day on Callin. I was like, I don't know. Don't listen to lunatics. That's what I always say. Just refuse. What is overshoot? Ecological overshoot happens when the demands of a species. So the reason why I'm reading this part is to, and we've said this a million times in a million different ways on this channel, but this is to describe the problem of overshoot and how it applies to humans. We only think, right? We have entered a phase in humanity when we're like, no, absolutely not. There's not a problem at all. I like all these humans. They are nice. They are really good humans. Humans do great things. They're always good. right? Those people. Um, ecological overshoot happens when the demands of a species exceed the regenerative capacity of the ecosystem. That's pretty simple, cut and dried. As the species multiplies, it consumes, or the people that want to tell you that thinking about this or acknowledging this or saying this is so is, it is a plan, an evil, dastardly plan. The people talking about overshoot, okay. Um, as the species multiplies, it consumes the ecosystem faster and faster, and the population skyrockets. Once there is nothing left to eat, the population collapses. This is the meta problem of our time. When people talk about problems the world is facing, they usually focus on climate change or biodiversity loss or the threat of nuclear war. But all of these problems are merely symptoms of overshoot. Where have we heard this before? Let me think. I've heard it from a certain someone. To help you understand, let's take a look at a classic example of overshoot. And this is the part I wanted to read, that occurred on an island off the coast of Alaska. The St. Matthew Island Reindeer Herd. St. Matthew Island is 128 square miles of tundra in the middle of the Bering Sea, over 200 miles from the nearest Alaskan village. It is said to be the most remote place in Alaska. Prior to World War II, it was unoccupied. Then in 1944, the Coast Guard installed a LORAN, or a long-range aids to navigation, and put 19 men on the island to operate the station. In order to make sure the men had a backup food source, the Coast Guard released 29 reindeer onto the island. For the reindeer, it was heaven. There were no predators, there was grass everywhere, and the tree trunks were covered with lichen, which is like candy to reindeer. When World War II began drawing to a close, the men were pulled from the island and the reindeer were left behind. Over the next decade, they began breeding prolifically. 13 years later, in 1957, Dave Klein, a biologist working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, visited St. Matthew Island. He and his assistant counted about 1,350 reindeer, all of which appeared to be very well fed. With mats of lichen several inches thick, the island had plenty of food for the population of reindeer to grow exponentially. In 1963, 6 years later, Klein returned to the island with 3 other scientists. As soon as they arrived, they saw reindeer everywhere. Incredibly, they counted 6,000 reindeer, from 29 to 6,000. However, the deer did not appear to be as fat and healthy as before, and the land showed signs of overgrazing. Warning signs. He returned in 1966, just 3 years later, and what he found was horrifying. The island was covered with deer skeletons, and there were only 42 living deer left. That is wild. From 6,000 to 42 in 3 years, all of which were emaciated. This means the population had plummeted by 99% in just a few years. It looks like a chart from limits to growth. This chart here. You know the limits to growth thing there? This looks like a chart from that. Okay. So why did this happen? Most people are perplexed when they hear this story. Why didn't the reindeer population grow to the island's carrying capacity, then level off? The answer is overshoot. Most people would assume that if there were 6,000 deer living on an island, then the carrying capacity must be somewhere above 6,000. In reality, the carrying capacity was probably more like 1,000 or 2,000. The deer population grew faster than the local flora could regenerate. Why did the population of deer grow so quickly? Because of exponential growth. People have a tendency to think of growth as steady and linear, but life doesn't grow that way. As long as there are no limiting factors like predators, diseases, or lack of food, a population of animals will keep doubling until something stops it. In the case of St. Matthew Island, the deer population doubled every 2 to 3 years until 1960 or so, when the growth began to slow down. Finally, once 99% of the food was gone, there was a mass die-off, leaving only 42 surviving reindeer. There you go. That's a little, and here's the size of the world population over the last 12,000 years, right? This is, for the people that are, all the whole limits to growth crowd and the, anybody talking about population, overpopulation is a eugenicist crowd, Malthusian crowd, for all those people. Just acknowledge to me that the population of humanity has, doubled. I don't know how many times has the population of humanity doubled in the last 200 years. I don't know it off. It's like 3 or 4 times. But you can't double the population of even humans. You can't do that without some repercussions. You can't just go, well, no, yeah, absolutely not. There's no problem whatsoever. The carrying capacity of the planet is like 1 trillion people. You know what I mean? You've heard like really like interesting, very interesting like opinions about like, well, the carrying capacity is, of course, it's 100 billion people. Come on, man. Like, come on. Yeah. You cannot keep growing that way and not, imagine if your own household was growing as quickly. Imagine if the predators or the pests in your yard were growing that quickly. Imagine. Apply the same math to something else in your life and tell me that it's still a good thing. So, I'm just, come on now. Come on now. But I don't know. I'm not saying we're all bad. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm not saying that humans, they all gotta. I know some people think that, but I'm not one of those people. Humans, they all gotta go away, or they're all terrible. They're the worst thing ever. No, just the sum total of what we're doing. The sum total, the macro of what we're doing is not good. That's just reality. That's just facts. It's hard to really look at the world and go, no problem whatsoever. Okay. All righty. All righty then. Let's see. Where do I go first? We are gonna hop off of YouTube pretty soon, guys. Just letting you know. But have you heard about this story? I just saw this like just kind of out of the corner of my eye today. This is an interesting story about the people that were kidnapped and died in Mexico. The Americans. Guess what they were there for? To get some medical care, right? Because the medical care is abundant and cheap in Mexico, and is not here. People cannot afford to get medical care here in the richest country in the world. They left the richest country in human history to go to a third world country for affordable basic health care needs. America is broken. This is from the end of the world party. 2 Americans kidnapped in Mexico are dead and 2 are alive, local governor says. Anyways, a trip for medical care gone wrong. This is, come on. Now, come on now. Come on now. Again, to the people that are like, well, you don't want the government running your health care. They're not running the health care right now. I'm guessing you're getting the best health care right now, top notch, right? But in Mexico, they give people health care and they have much cheaper health care. But I hear people describe, telling their stories all the time about having to go to Mexico for healthcare because they can't afford it here. The group had traveled to Mexico for a medical procedure. They had been seeking a cosmetic medical procedure. Oh, geez. But whether they're getting something cosmetic or not, yes, people go to Mexico for drugs and dental care. I actually had a family member that used to go to Tijuana to buy migraine medicine, because the migraine medicine that worked here was just stupid expensive. And so you could go to Tijuana and get it for like half or less than half the price. And also dental care, right? I've heard of plenty of people going for dental care. I mean, all kinds of things. All kinds of, small procedures that here would cost, thousands and thousands of dollars, right? You can go there and get it for, a couple grand or whatever. Or less. Yeah, I don't think cosmetic surgery is necessary medical care also, but regardless of whether they're going there for cosmetic surgery, we know that all other medical care in the United States is wildly expensive, right? Jim Bendel points this out about The Guardian doing a big story on methane. Guardian splashed a story about the dangers of methane to the environment this morning without mentioning the worst man-made methane leak event in history. Do you guys know what that was? Nord Stream pipeline explosion. Which is a fair point. It would, fair point. We care about the environment so much, except for when we're willing to destroy it, for military advantage or some dollars or something. All right, guys. I'm going to jump off of YouTube now just so I don't get myself in trouble, because I want to talk about something that I've been meaning to talk about, been wanting to talk about. And many other outlets have already been discussing this story. And Schulte says, before we leave, in Cuba, your healthcare is free. You've got the best doctors in the world. Too bad they won't let Americans travel there, but if you snuck in, they'd heal you, no questions asked. And I've heard of other people in other, going to Europe. I was just talking to a woman the other day who said, we were traveling in Europe and had a medical emergency. They took us right in the hospital, and they, nobody asked us for insurance or, they didn't ask us for money. They just said, come on in, and they took care of us. We were just there visiting. So that's how you get treated there, but not here. All right. I'll see you all on Rockfin and on Callin, and we'll go hang out for the rest of the show there.